Let's go! 5 things LSU needs to do before they even consider anyone for offensive and defensive coordinator. This could be my most important video yet, especially point number 5, which is one that Scott Woodward and Ed Orgeron really need to think about. So go on ahead, subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to get to 3K before the end of the week. Let's go! So before we get started, I have teamed up with an analytics firm that has consulted on quite a few major hires. So if you happen to be a part of LSU athletics, or if you happen to know a booster or someone that is involved with the decision-making process, I would happily help you out. I do believe a clear vision is very important. Whenever you do coaching search videos, it does get a lot of clicks. I don't want to do that right now simply because names are just names. A name doesn't mean anything unless you know their vision, okay? Bo Pelini was a name. That was as big of a name as you possibly could have gotten for the defensive coordinator job, especially considering his history with LSU. I think LSU made the mistake in thinking hiring Bo Pelini, who's a name, Scott Linehan, who's a name that has been floated around. As you can tell, both of those things didn't work themselves out, and you had to dish out millions upon millions of dollars when it comes to actually buying out their contract. Point number 1 that LSU needs to answer is, what is your budget? So obviously, it sucks when you're dishing out all this buyout money in the middle of all of it. So I know Scott Woodward has said, well, it's kind of weird because we're on a budget, Coach Orgeron. And with this budget, you need to make radically important decisions with both sides of the football. Number 2 is a timetable. Now, this is a very important thing to remember. LSU shouldn't be in a total rush right now because they do have a slight bit of leverage over this recruiting class because they've all already signed on to play for LSU, which, of course, kind of sucks for the 21 kids that have already signed because they were thinking that they were going to play for, obviously, Coach Ensminger or Coach Linehan or, obviously, Coach Pelini. And none of those 3 guys are going to be involved at all. Like the 3 guys that actually call the plays. Yeah, your timetable doesn't have to be all that important. So those are the first 2, and those are kind of like no-brainers. How much money do we want to spend, and how quickly do we have to make the decisions? Now let's get into the nitty-gritty. I think point number 3 is the most important one for Ed Orgeron and Scott Woodward. What kind of team do you want to be? That's a very important question. I think one thing we cannot rule out of this equation, will LSU go back to the ground and pound days? Obviously, that's not something what a lot of you want, but a lot of coaches and just a lot of people in general, in times of crisis, they like to go back to what they know. And we see this all the time with businesses. They try something new and it works for a little bit, but then it doesn't work. Guess what? They're going to go back to selling their original item. Ed Orgeron, well, the Joe Brady thing worked. That type of offense worked. Maybe he doesn't feel that's the kind of offense he can run towards the future. Remember, Orgeron at his core is a defensive-minded coach. He's always going to think, or he could think, that helping out your defense is the most important thing for your team. And we saw this year. Against South Carolina, against Arkansas, both of those games that were wins, his number 1 goal was winning time of possession and keeping his defense off the field. Well, how do you win time of possession? Well, you run the football a lot. Sometimes for 3 yards, sometimes for 5 yards. Basically, the way that Les Miles used to coach this team is the way that Ed Orgeron coached in those 2 games in particular. Long drives, push piles, enforce your will. Now, personally, I don't want to go back to those days. I do think they are prehistoric. But to defend the Milesians out there, well, it does win you a lot of games. Les Miles was a guy that won 10 games a year with this formula, and that formula is good enough to beat a lot of teams. The problem is that I don't think that formula is the one that's going to win you national championships. There's a reason why Nick Saban doesn't play that way anymore. He's moved on. So I don't think you should rule that out. One thing that we always talk about, your offensive and defensive coordinator needs to coincide. Their styles need to work really well together. You can't just hire an offensive coordinator and then coach the offense and a defensive coordinator and have them just coach the defense. Those two things intertwine. So that's why you need to first have clarity on offense before you make the decision on defense. So number 4 ties in with number 1. Do you hire within? Budgets are tight. It's a lot easier when budgets are tight to hire within. Before we get to some coordinator names, Christian Lacouture and Kelvin Shepherd. 2 guys that have killed it behind the scenes recruiting. 2 guys that bleed purple and gold. Christian Lacouture actually played for Ed Orgeron. Kelvin Shepherd, multiple stops in the NFL. Amazing personality, amazing relatability. I loved Kelvin Shepherd. I loved interviewing him while I was at LSU. And both of those guys are really talented dudes. Do you promote Christian Lacouture to a higher role? Do you promote Kelvin Shepherd to a higher on-field role? You did that last year with Kev Falk, so maybe that's something that you consider. Now, for 2 names as far as coordinators are concerned, Corey Raymond as the defensive coordinator seems to be the guy that a lot of you referenced to me, and Russ Callaway at the offensive coordinator position. I'll go deeper with both of those guys on their own separate videos, but I'm more so just focusing on the convenience of just hiring those guys to take over the play calling duties. So number 5, it looks like 2 weird words put together, but it's actually the most important point of them all. Tabula rasa, okay? For my philosopher nerds out there, I was a philosophy minor at LSU. It's from a famous philosopher named John Locke, and it's actually a Latin phrase that basically translates to erased tablet or a clean slate. Is the right move at LSU to wipe it all clean? And basically, moving on from Ed Orgeron. Now, that's tough for me. I still think Ed Orgeron should be the head coach of this program. He took the 2019 to places we never even thought was possible with LSU football. Now, is what a lot of you would argue is, well, how much of that was Orgeron? Was it just Brady, Burrow, Ensminger, and Aranda? Or was it actually Orgeron? Or was it Jamar Chase, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Patrick Queen, Justin Jefferson, and this ridiculous amount of LSU talent? By the way, Joe Burrow to LSU. The primary recruiter was your safeties coach, Bill Bush, who, you just booted out. There's just so much just gunk that is surrounding this program that you love, that I love, of course. Maybe it's time to just wipe everything clean. And a lot of you commenters have said that regarding Ed Orgeron. And that could be uncomfortable because obviously I like Ed Orgeron. Like I said, if I played for him, I'd run through a brick wall for him. I think he obviously is a guy that gets a lot out of his players. He's a great motivator. He is Louisiana. We saw that with the national championship run. Heck, we even saw it with the success LSU had in 2018. We saw it in the 60 Minutes piece. We saw it just everywhere. But remember, this is LSU. Other coaches have won here. There's a lot of talented coaches that could come in and win here right now. This is not a situation where one coach built this program. And obviously, if you're going to make an important decision such as that one, if you're Scott Woodward, well, that's one you need to make before you start doing anything with coordinators. I think Ed Orgeron's job is safe. I think his job should be safe. I think winning a national championship the way that LSU won it in 2019, I don't just believe it's just a fluke. Quick shout out to Marcus, who dropped a $200 super chat on the channel. Marcus, thank you so much. I really do appreciate all your super chats. What do you guys want to do as far as live chats? It's Power Hour LSU. Boo! Ba-dum, bum, bum, bum. Come on, Coach O. I believe in you, man. I believe.